The Path is a teaching series sponsored by World Missionary Evangelism. We hope that this series will deepen your knowledge and walk in our Lord Jesus Christ. Here's your host, John Cathcart.
In the last program, after we finished with the message to the 7 churches of Asia, we read chapter 4 of the revelation of Jesus Christ to St. John on Patmos, and it was a vision John had. He saw the heavens open, and he saw a throne in heaven. Now, last program, I read the passage. You need to read it again for yourselves. So we're just going to talk about it, trusting that you're familiar with this passage, or will get familiar with it. If we look at chapter 4 of the Revelation, we can see that it can be divided into 5 parts. The first part consists of verses 1 and 2, and is about John's experience and his consciousness. The second part, verses 2 to 3, is about the heavenly throne and its occupant, the one who was sitting on it. The third section is verses 4 and 5, and it is about the elders. We'll talk about who these elders were later, and the 7 lamps burning in front of the throne. The fourth part is verses 6 through 8, and it addresses the forefront to the heavenly throne. In other words, what's out there? If this was the throne and that's the court, it addresses what was out there. And then section number 5 is verses 9 through 11, and it is about the acclamation of the elders. The elders all agree. The acclamation of the elders and the 4 beasts. Well, let's talk about section 1 of John's vision of the heavenly throne. Evidently, John was in his natural state of consciousness, just like we are right now, when he saw a door open in heaven. Now, the Greek word here for door means a portal or an entrance. I think door is a very good translation. And John heard a voice saying, "Come up hither." And immediately John is in the spirit state of consciousness, and he has this vision of God's throne. Let's talk about section 2 of John's vision of the heavenly throne, which is verses 2 through 3. If we examine part 2 and 3 a little closer, that's verses 1 through 5, or verses 2 through 5, we can see that part 2 is what we can best describe as a patriarchal vision of God, and parts 3 and 4, that is verses 4 through 8, are what we can describe best as a prophetic vision of God. These are just words we're choosing that seem to fit what is being described. So here we have a patriarchal vision of God and a prophetic vision of God. However, in order to be able to make that statement, we have to be very familiar with both the Bible narrative, the whole thing, and what the ancients and the patriarchs understood about God and man. And when I say patriarchs, I mean Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, so on and so forth. Now, John says a strange thing. He says that the one who sat on the throne was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone. That's a little puzzling. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like an emerald. Well, let's look at this a little closer. The word John uses for rainbow is the Greek word iris, just like the iris of your eye. And it's the basis of our English word iris, or the circular colored portion of the eye. Now, the Greek word iris derives from another Greek word, meaning to utter or to tell about. And in turn, it is related to another Greek word meaning to pour forth or to speak of and about. Well, the Greek word iris can also be translated rainbow. And interestingly, the rainbow was the symbol for the female messenger of the pagan deities. Now, we also note, now these things may be wasted on Christians today, but they weren't wasted on John's audience. We also note that the iris is, quote, round the throne, unquote, where the Greek word for round means all around or a full circle. So this is just not what we think of as our classic rainbow from one part of Earth to the other, but it's a totally circular rainbow that is all around the throne. So John is saying that he saw a throne in heaven surrounded by a full circle iris or rainbow that looked like an emerald and poured forth utterances. And the one who sat on the throne looked like a jasper stone and a sardius stone. Well, to say the least, this is a very unique presentation of the heavenly throne. Is that what you were expecting John to see? But that's what he saw. Well, before we try to analyze John's statement, and we need to analyze it. You know, some people, I had a relative by marriage, young couple, in the ministry, that's told me, the lady told me, that whenever they came to a difficult passage in the scripture, they just said, well, bless the Lord, means whatever it means. But God wants you to get more out of the Word of God than just saying, bless the Lord. It means whatever God knows it means. God is trying to convey something to you that you need to know. So the question we need to ask is, what was the common written resource concerning God and the mystery of man that was available in times past to the patriarchs and also to the other ancients of the old world?
World Missionary Evangelism, through its wide variety of mission outreach programs, is an evangelical force in developing nations, and it all begins with native missionaries. Called by Christ to do His work, our native missionaries are first and foremost soul winners. Often facing hostile opposition, they have the courage to reach out in compassion to the lost, sharing the good news with those in their communities. But that is just the beginning of WME's evangelistic programs. World Missionary Evangelism reaches children through vacation Bible schools and Christian schools. So even as we feed the hungry bodies of little ones, we also feed their souls. For almost 6 decades, WME has been building churches in both urban and rural areas. Most of these churches are used every day of the week and become beacons of light in the areas where they serve. Churches not only provide worship opportunities, but they also offer a community gathering point, education, childcare, and even serve as feeding centers for the hungry. WME not only sponsors native missionaries, we train them. World Missionary Evangelism has local pastoral education programs for new missionaries and continuing education programs for those who have been in the field for years. WME also has Bible colleges that provide degree programs for those seeking a fuller knowledge of the Bible and Christian outreach. The evangelism in World Missionary Evangelism is not just a part of our name. It defines our mission, our focus, and is at the heart of everything we do.
At the end of the last section, we asked a question. What was the common written resource about God, about the heavens, about the mystery of man that was available in ancient times to the patriarchs and to the ancients. I don't know if you ever thought about this. They didn't have television. They didn't have newspapers. What did they read or consult? Well, David takes this matter up in Psalm 19 and again in Psalm 8. In Psalm 8, he asks the question, what is man? But in Psalm 19, he deals with revelation from God. And in Psalm 19, David says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night to night shows knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone throughout all the earth, and their words to the ends of the world. In them he has set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. In them he has set a tabernacle for the sun, S-U-N, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. Now, Psalm 19 has been attacked by a lot of critics and unbelievers. They said, well, actually, this short psalm is actually two psalms that somebody said, let's stick together and make one psalm out of it. That's what they say. Because in the first part of the psalm, we read about the heavens, but at verse 7, the psalm changes and says, the law of the Lord is perfect concerning the soul, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart, and so on. And people said, well, these are two different psalms. Somebody just stuck them together. But the great Bible scholar Bullinger said no, because the verbal conjugations of the first part belong to the second part and vice versa. Now, that's a linguistic technicality. But the point is that astute students of linguistics recognize, no, this is one psalm. Well, the word David uses for heavens when he says the heavens declare the glory of God is the word shemayim, Hebrew word, which means both the visible arch in which the clouds move. You look up and you see the clouds moving. The visible arch in which the clouds move, as well as the higher ether where the celestial bodies move. We recognize this arch where the clouds move, but way out there you see the stars where the celestial bodies move. Well, the Bible scholar Bullinger also added the comment that tabernacle, in them he set a tabernacle for the sun. The word tabernacle is the same as tent or house, and hence the signs of the zodiac are called the houses of the sun, because in them the sun moves and dwells and completes his circuit. Well, the common resource about God and man that was available to the ancients and the patriarchs was the heavens, and the meaning that was attached to the heavenly constellations. And David says about this celestial language, the language of the stars, that it's a universal language. And the message has gone out globally. It's gone out to the ends of the world, which is another way of saying it's global. And indeed, the message of the stars, or what is called the gospel in the stars, was known by the ancients for centuries until modern times and other interests, and since that knowledge was corrupted. And today, we have that knowledge in the form of horoscopes, and people apply the constellations to themselves. I'm Capricorn, I'm Sagittarius, and I'm Leo, and I'm Virgo. That is a corruption of an ancient knowledge. Well, two modern scholars have made a study of this whole matter. Frances Rolleston, in her work Mazzaroth, and I'm asking our TV director to put up the frontispiece, the front page of her book. And her work was based on Arabian traditions. And then the other scholar who's done work on this is E.W. Bullinger, the Anglican priest. And he covers the matter briefly in his appendices to the Companion Bible. And I'm asking our TV director to put that sheet up for a minute. Of course, you can get a Companion Bible, probably one of the best study Bibles ever produced. You can get it from our famous friends, Amazon. I got my copy from Southern Methodist University. And in a separate work entitled The Witness of the Stars, and I'm asking our TV director to put up the front page, the cover page of that book, Bullinger covered this subject in depth. And finally, I'm asking our TV director to put up a diagrammatic summary of what their message is. And you may look at this and say, I have never heard it on this wise before. That is because preachers have dropped this out of their knowledge and aren't familiar with it. But it used to be when people looked at the heavens, they knew what the message of the heavens was. Well, what John is telling us in his vision of the one who sat on the throne is if you want to know about him, you must understand the message of the stars. And since he's like a jasper, a sardius, and an emerald stone, it might be a good idea to know something about the message of the birthstones. And we'll pick these subjects up in the next section.
At the heart of everything world missionary evangelism does is reaching out and saving the lost through sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. We do this through native missionaries. Right now, we have many native missionaries who need sponsors. That's right, partners just like you, who will help them become full-time workers for Christ. That provides this native missionary with the ability to give his life full-time to gospel outreach. We also need Bibles. That allows us to share the word with those we reach in the mission field. If you would like to either sponsor a native missionary or provide the gift of Bibles, simply call us at 1-800-501-2851.
Talking about the vision that John had on the Isle of Patmos of the heavenly throne. And we noted that John saw someone sitting on the throne that looked like a fully circular rainbow and also looked like three precious stones, namely a jasper stone, a sardius stone, and an emerald stone. Well, when you start talking about these types of stones, Bible scholars immediately think about the 12 precious stones that were mounted on the breastplate of the high priest, and each of those 12 stones was associated with one of the 12 tribes. Well, the stones on the breastplate of the high priest were like the 12 loaves of showbread in the holy place. The loaves and the stones were there to remind God of his covenant with Israel. The loaves in the holy place were before his eyes, and the stones on the breastplate of the high priest were on his heart. Now, actually, Bible scholars are not absolutely sure of the actual identity of each of these stones because they used old-fashioned names. And they're not exactly sure of which stone was associated with which tribe, but regardless, we will show you, and I'm asking our TV director to put up a picture of the high priest with his breastplate and the 12 stones, and that is one person's idea of how those stones were actually arranged. Well, if we consider this iris, this emerald iris that John saw, and the jasper stone, and the sardius stone, which were closing and completing the circle, then the vision of John says that the one on the heavenly throne is the Word, because the word iris means to utter or pour forth knowledge. He is the Alpha and Omega, and the first and the last, because those two stones happen to represent the eldest and the youngest of the sons of Jacob, the eldest tribe and the youngest tribe. And lastly, he on the throne, the representation presents he that was dead, like Reuben, but is alive, like Benjamin. Now, the overall emerald appearance of the iris says this, that the one on the throne is the Lion of Judah, because emerald was Judah's stone. It says he is the Shiloh, or the Prince of Peace, the promised great prince that would come to Judah. And lastly, that according to Genesis 49, the one on the throne is he unto whom the gathering of the people will be. Now, it is important to notice that John is saying this on the basis of Old Testament type and symbol. John is tying the Old Covenant and the New Covenant understanding together. And he's saying that the Old Testament and the New Testament reveal one and the same thing. They reveal the Christ whom it is all about, and there's no disconnect between the true old and the true new. Well, as I said, the stones are not certain. The association of the stones with the tribes is not certain beyond doubt, but there are three that we are sure about. I'm going to ask our TV director to put them up on the screen, and we'll deal with them one by one. First of all, the jasper stone was a dark green stone. It was associated with the tribe of Benjamin. Benjamin means son of my right hand, and Benjamin was a type of Christ who sits at God's right hand. And just as Benjamin's birth cost his mother's life, so the birth of Christ cost the ancient people their former life. Well, the second stone is the blood-red sardius, and it's the stone of the eldest son, Reuben. Now, Reuben was disinherited by his father Jacob for dishonoring him. But Moses set Jacob's curse aside and said concerning Reuben, let his men be many and not few. Thus, Moses is a type of Christ in that his word and authority rises above that of the patriarchs and delivers men from evil, restoring them to their place as sons of God. The role of the outcast Reuben defines the role of all restored outcasts, namely, it is to bring the water of life to the world. Well, the third stone is the stone of Judah. Actually, Judah has two stones, and we'll see why. First, the emerald, which is green, and it speaks of Christ making us kings and priests with God. The constellation for Judah was Leo the lion. Christ has made us kings and priests with God, and hence the overall appearance of the iris is that of emerald, as in Revelation chapter 4. And note that emerald, with its light green color, is specified in Exodus 28 and 18. But Judah also has a sapphire, a light blue sapphire stone. And in Exodus 24 and 10, a scripture many Christians are not familiar with, when Moses saw the God of Israel, a sapphire was under his feet, and likewise in Ezekiel 1:26, the vision of the cherubim, the firmament, looked like a sapphire. Well, these two stones reflect the dual nature of the king-priest function of the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Green speaks of the earthlies and ministry to the everyday person, and blue speaks of the heavenlies and of royalty. Well, this concludes our study of birthstones and our study of the breastplate of the high priest, and in the next session we'll get on with the last section of John's vision in Revelation chapter 4.
For almost 6 decades, world missionary evangelism has been involved in sharing the good news of salvation through Jesus Christ. Going to many places where people have never seen a Bible or heard the Word, reaching out in other regions where Christians are a small minority, our native missionaries have fearlessly joined the spiritual battle to save souls and transform lives. Each day, people come to know Jesus through this mission, and they're baptized in His name. Those who are baptized become part of a Christian fellowship that impacts communities and brings light to dark regions. Programs like this prove that the evangelism in world missionary evangelism is not just a part of a name. It defines our mission, our focus, and is the heart of our work.